Next, I just want to talk about the electronic switch that exists as sort of a part of the sample and hold system. What is basically happening is that the clock that exists in the sample and hold is used, the output of that is used to switch between two inputs. So every time the clock ticks, you move from one input to the other input, back to the first, and so on. So let's hear where we're at with that. Okay, so I'm going to take the sine wave from oscillator 2 in LFO mode, plug that into A of the switch, and then I'm going to take the sawtooth from 1, put that in the other side of the switch, and then I'm going to take the output of the clock and plug it into an input on the filter. So there's our very basic noise, but let's hear what happens. So it is switching back and forth fast enough between that sawtooth and that sine wave from the two different oscillators that it's actually creating a new modulation wave shape. So you don't have to settle for, standard good old periodic wave shapes. You can actually make new wave shapes by using this switch as it switches back and forth to create new wave shapes. And let's mess with the rate and see what we get here. Now, the slow setting, you can hear it going back and forth between the sine wave and the sawtooth. But as we speed it up, the switching gets faster, and we end up switching in the midst of wave shapes so fast that you can't tell that you've switched. And rhythms emerge based on the frequency setting of your oscillator. And that is really cool. And you can do that with envelopes, any control voltage. But hey, you don't have to stop there. Theoretically, let's do this. Let's switch both oscillator 1 and 2 into audio mode, and then we'll take the output from the clock, we'll put it as an audio input, and then we can do this exact same thing between two different waveforms. You gotta love oscillator 2's modulation of the filter. Okay, so let's hear what we have now. Let's switch to this. So you can hear it switching back and forth between the sawtooth and the sine wave. So let's see what happens when we speed it up. It's hard to get it with these two different wave shapes. You're actually going to hear, obviously, the switch. What happens if we use saw, though? Interesting. But yeah, you can switch back and forth between these two things. And keep in mind, I wonder if this works. Let's see if we take the trigger out. I think this doesn't work, which is sad. And I'm not sure why it wouldn't. If we take the trigger out from the keyboard and plug it into the external clock in, can we make the switch happen with every note? No, too bad. Oh well, that would have been super cool. I guess it's just the straight internal clock, and it's not going to affect that, unfortunately, because it'd be really cool, because then each note could be a different oscillator wave shape. Anyway, I just remembered that didn't work. It didn't work on the original. I originally discovered that did not work on the original, so this is authentic. Anyhow, you can also do the opposite of this and say, let's see, what would be the good application of this? Let's take a sine wave out of oscillator 2, and we'll put it into the input, and then we will take the outputs and put them into the inputs of the two other oscillators. This is just to demonstrate what's happening, not to make something cool sounding. So we have these two oscillators going, and well, actually, let's control it. That would be better. So, and then let's bring the switch in. So what you're hearing there initially, at first I'm like, wow, what is this? And I'm going to explore that in a second. But right now, you can hear that modulation we're getting from the sine wave from oscillator 2. You can hear it moving back and forth between the square wave output of oscillator 1 and the sawtooth output of oscillator 3. But let's see what happens when we speed it up. That rhythm is really interesting. It's interesting what we're getting there. That's this is very, very weird. And then, let's see what happens if we bring the sample and hold in on our sine wave modulation. Anyway, there is some real possibility there, and now I'm wishing I would have come up with the cool sound that is very obviously capable of making, instead of the demonstrative sound, which is boring but demonstrates promise. Anyway, that is basically what you have going with the electronic switch. It can be two sources directed to one output, or one source directed to two outputs, as controlled by the internal clock of the sample and hold. And that is the electronic switch that exists on the Korg ARP 2600M.